Hi guys. Um, I wanted to talk very briefly about people who claim to be anti-utilitarian or people who claim to be not utilitarian. Some people claim that they are not utilitarian in the sense that they don't necessarily seek anything concrete or attempt to derive any measurable capital from their endeavors, their activities, their plans, etc., and ultimately their actions, right? So there is a small subset of people who dare to claim that, that they are not utilitarian. And I think that I think the error that they make fundamentally is that they assume that pleasure itself is not utility. In that even when we are merely doing something for the pleasure of doing it, for the pleasure we derive from it, the kind of gratification that we derive from it, maybe it's hedonistic gratification, or maybe it's something of the sort. When we are approaching an activity from the perspective of, will this bring me pleasure, we are ultimately engaging in a utility calculation, a calculation of utility. And so ultimately, this is why I've titled the video, the inescapable oppression of utility, is that even when we're acting in a non-utilitarian way, we are still utilitarian in the sense that pleasure is utility. And even when we're seeking hedonistic gratification or pure enjoyment from a situation or an activity, we are still engaging in the activity in a utilitarian way, seeking the utility of hedonistic gratification and pleasure. And so in this sense, the mindset of utility is inescapable, as much as we want to imagine that it is escapable and that we can actually exist outside of it. And perhaps I'm only speaking from my own narrow-mindedness, but at least I know that when I'm approaching, I feel I do things all the time in a non-utilitarian way, purely for the enjoyment of it. But I also recognize that there is a kind of logic, utilitarian logic, that still underlies my engagement in the activity, because hedonistic gratification is still a kind of utility. And regardless whether or not it's resulting in any measurable capital generation, it's still an activity may produce psychological, non-measurable capital, which is still utility in the form of hedonistic gratification. So my point is just that it really, to me, seems impossible for someone to be non-utilitarian. And it's because even when, right, so, because pleasure is a kind of utility. And if they're seeking pleasure, we only do things because we're seeking something out of doing that thing. And so, regardless, even if it's just pleasure that we derive from doing the thing, we're still doing that for utility reasons, because we're trying to derive pleasure. In that sense, the oppression of utility is inescapable, because, and it all goes back to the claim of some people to be non-utilitarian. They really are utilitarian. It's simply that, and they are, by the nature of their mind as a human being, inescapably utilitarian. Because even when, what they mean is that, I'll do things just for pleasure, or I'll do things with no concern for measurable gain. It's impossible, I believe, in the thinking of a human, just on how we approach doing things, that one can do that thing outside of a utilitarian framework inherently. They're still, even in doing something unproductive, still approaching that unproductive activity through the lens of utility, because they're seeking pleasure out of that activity. And that still makes them utility concerned, if not productive. Hence, it's impossible in my mind for a person to be truly non-utilitarian. And so, you know, I'm slowly coming to realizations in my life. You know, I do things all the time just for pure hedonistic gratification. And to me, that's a kind of utility. And I think it's impossible to do things with absolutely no concern for utility. Because pleasure is utility. And so even when you're seeking, right, mere pleasure, that's still a utility. And if you're seeking the pleasure, then you're operating on a utility concern basis, getting something out of something else. Hence, you are utilitarian in the way that I've defined it. So it's almost inescapable. It's just a part of human cognition. And ultimately, that kind of utility concern, the calculation of what we get out of what, is just a part of human cognition. And I see that it very much underlies all human motivation. So, you know, I don't really believe people when they say that they're truly non-utilitarian. You know, but maybe I'm just speaking from my own perspective, but I think that generally speaking, what I'm saying is accurate. But I don't know. I would love comments on this, because I would find a person that could truly act outside of concerns for utility. I'd find them fascinating as a character study. So please provide your thoughts. Thanks for watching.